I just hope you find something stable someday. My sister Camille said it sweetly, soft enough to sound caring, loud enough for the entire table to hear. The dining room smelled like rosemary turkey and cinnamon, crystal glasses, polished silver, 42 guests, investors, family friends, board members. This wasn't just Thanksgiving. This was a celebration dinner. Camille had just been promoted to executive director of Wolf Development Group, the luxury real estate empire my father built from nothing, and apparently I was the after-dinner entertainment. I smiled politely and lowered my eyes like I'd practiced. "Thank you," I said gently. "I'm working on it." Laughter circled the table. Not cruel, not obvious, just dismissive. My mother leaned toward Mrs. Harrington, one of their longtime investors, and whispered loudly enough, "She's always been more creative." Creative. The word they use when they mean irrelevant. Nobody at that table knew the truth. Not Camille, not my father, not the board members clinking glasses. They saw a woman in a simple navy dress, no jewelry, no announcement. What they didn't see, the controlling entity behind Wolf Development's expansion debt. Me. I didn't hide wealth. I hid governance. There's a difference. When my father needed emergency liquidity 3 years ago to avoid covenant breaches, he didn't go to the banks publicly. He accepted capital from a private holding firm, anonymous, structured, silent. Majority voting rights tied to debt instruments. That firm? Mine. Camille raised her glass. "To leadership," she beamed. Applause. I lifted mine too. "To transparency," I added softly. She didn't notice. But across the room, 2 men in suits did, because at exactly 8:17 p.m., while gravy bouts passed and gratitude speeches began, the internal compliance review triggered automatically, and Wolf Development had no idea their expansion loan had just been placed under covenant examination. I didn't need to humiliate them. The structure would do that for me. Camille thought the toast was about her promotion. She didn't realize it was about to become a shareholder emergency. Before we move on, tell me, where are you watching from right now, and what time is it there? If you love stories where quiet power speaks louder than loud arrogance, hit like and subscribe. It helps this channel grow, and it tells me you want more stories where strategy wins over ego. Now, Camille has always been loud confidence. Perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect speeches that sound rehearsed but effortless. She believes visibility equals power. I learned early that it doesn't. Power is leverage, and leverage is quiet. 3 years ago, Wolf Development was drowning, not publicly, not dramatically, just the slow kind of drowning that happens when aggressive expansion outruns cash flow. 2 high-rise projects stalled, 1 overseas investment collapsed, bridge loans stacked up like unpaid promises. My father wouldn't admit it, Camille didn't even understand it, but I did. Because while they were posing for magazine covers, I was reviewing their SEC filings for fun, habit from my compliance background. That's when I saw it. Debt covenants tight enough to snap. 1 missed liquidity ratio and the banks could seize everything. So when my father asked, reluctantly, if I knew anyone who could help raise private capital, I did what they never expected. I didn't hide recognition. I structured protection. Through a private holding firm registered in Delaware, layered ownership, silent controlling interest, voting triggers tied to covenant review clauses. They thought they were borrowing money. They didn't realize they were transferring oversight. And here's the part that matters. They never read the governance appendix carefully because they never imagined I'd be the one controlling it. To them, I was still the quiet daughter who never quite fit. So tonight, as Camille basked in applause, she believed she was ascending. She didn't realize every champagne glass in that room was financed by capital I controlled. And at exactly 8:17 p.m., the internal compliance flag went live, triggered by 1 clause. Material misrepresentation of leadership stability. Camille thought the toast was harmless, but when you publicly announce executive authority without majority lender acknowledgement, you breach trust language, and breaches have consequences. They didn't notice the first sign something was wrong until my father's phone buzzed mid-dessert. Dessert had just been served. Pumpkin pie, pecan tart. My mother insisting everyone try both. Camille was glowing. She had moved to the head of the table now. The symbolic shift subtle but intentional. Executive energy. My father's phone buzzed. He ignored it at first. He hates interruptions, always has. It buzzed again, then again. 3 vibrations in under 20 seconds. I saw the change in his posture before he even checked it. His jaw tightened, his shoulders squared. He glanced at the screen. and the color drained slightly from his face. "What is it?" Camille asked lightly. "Nothing," he replied too quickly. But he stood up, excused himself, walked toward the hallway. Not rushed, controlled. That's how powerful men panic. His CFO followed 2 minutes later after checking his own device. Across the table, one of the Harrington investors subtly opened her email. Her smile faltered. I continued eating my pie, slowly, calmly. Camille noticed the shift in the room. "What's going on?" she laughed. No one answered, because what was happening wasn't dramatic, it was procedural. The compliance system had automatically flagged leadership announcement without lender notification, executive title expansion not cleared through majority governance, public representation risk under debt structure. That triggers review. Review freezes discretionary capital movement. Freezes discretionary capital means credit lines pause, project disbursements halt, pending acquisitions stall. No explosion, just suffocation. My father re-entered the dining room. His face was composed, but too tight. "Camille," he said quietly, "step into the study." Her smile slipped for half a second. "Now?" she asked. Yes. Not loud, worse, firm. Guests felt it. That social ripple, the one that says something isn't aligned, spread faster than gossip. Camille glanced around the table, embarrassed. Then she stood. When they disappeared down the hallway, conversation fractured into small whispers. Mrs. Harrington looked at me. "You seem calm," she observed. I set my fork down gently. "I always read the fine print," I replied. Her eyes sharpened slightly, because investors recognize tone, and calm in the middle of uncertainty signals knowledge. 5 minutes later, voices rose faintly from the study. Camille's tone wasn't polished anymore. It was sharp. "What do you mean, triggered review?" I didn't need to hear the rest. I already knew. The audit wasn't emotional, it was structural, and structure doesn't argue, it enforces. Camille thought it was a temporary glitch. She didn't know the lenders were already requesting an emergency call. Within 10 minutes, the study door opened again. My father's face looked older. Camille's looked furious. "Ladies and gentlemen," my father announced carefully, "we need to step away briefly for a lender call." Lender call. At Thanksgiving dinner. The room shifted. Board members stood immediately. Investors checked their phones openly now, because nobody schedules emergency lender calls during celebrations, unless something is wrong. Very wrong. Camille grabbed her tablet and walked toward the conference room at the back of the house. I stayed seated. Mrs. Harrington leaned closer. "Is this serious?" I sipped my water. If covenant language activates, it usually is. Across the hall, raised voices filtered through partially closed doors. Phrases drifted. Material representation. Voting majority acknowledgement. Temporary freeze pending compliance confirmation. Temporary freeze is the polite version of "you don't control liquidity anymore." Camille emerged 15 minutes later, no longer glowing. Her eyes scanned the room and landed on me. Suspicion, then calculation, because she was finally asking the right question. Who benefits from a covenant trigger tonight? My phone vibrated once. Private alert confirmation. Compliance review officially initiated. All expansion lines paused. Projects requiring discretionary funds now required majority lender sign-off, and that lender wasn't anonymous anymore. Camille walked straight toward me, and for the first time in her life, she didn't speak like she was superior.
Camille stopped directly in front of my chair. No smile, no performance. "What did you do?" she asked, quietly. Not accusatory, controlled. I looked up at her calmly. "I attended dinner." Her jaw tightened. "This review isn't random." "You're right," I said softly. "It isn't." Around us, the room had gone unnaturally quiet. Guests pretending not to listen. Investors absolutely listening. My father stepped closer. "Is this connected to the holding firm?" he asked, voice low. There it was. Recognition. I folded my hands on the table. "The holding firm has majority covenant oversight." Camille blinked. "Oversight? We don't answer to a lender." "You do," I corrected gently. "You structured expansion debt against controlling interest clauses." Her breathing changed. "You don't control that," she said. I held her gaze. "Yes, I do." Silence spread like spilled ink. Mrs. Harrington's fork paused mid-air. My father's face drained of color. Camille shook her head once. That firm is private equity. Yes. And you're saying, I'm the managing partner. Not loud, not dramatic, just clear. Her composure fractured. You? She whispered. I gave a small nod. I wanted transparency tonight, I said evenly. You just got it. Across the room, phones began lighting up again. Emergency governance review, effective immediately. That subject line travels fast. Camille turned to me. You're humiliating us. I met her eyes. You humiliated yourself when you announced authority you didn't have. Gasps weren't loud. They were quiet inhales. Worse. My father rubbed his temple. What do you want? Finally, the right question. I stood slowly. I want a formal executive audit, I said, full financial disclosure, and a board vote under oversight. Camille's confidence cracked. You'd collapse the company over ego? No, I said evenly, over governance. Across the room, investors were already stepping aside to take calls. Momentum had shifted, and once momentum shifts, it doesn't ask permission. Camille tried one last move that night, and it's what sealed her fall. Camille recovered faster than I expected. That's the thing about people who've never been told no. They pivot to attack. She turned toward the investors, forcing her smile back into place. Everyone, please, she said brightly. This is a misunderstanding. My sister doesn't actually sit on the holding board. She has no operational authority. A bold lie, publicly stated. I didn't interrupt. I reached into my clutch and removed a single document. Not thick, not dramatic, just a notarized governance confirmation. I handed it to Mrs. Harrington first. Majority voting authority. Managing partner, L. Wolfe Bennett. Effective date, 3 years ago. Mrs. Harrington's eyes widened. She passed it down the table. Camille's smile faltered. You're bluffing, she said. Call the lender. Ask who signs discretionary release. My father already knew the answer. That's why he wasn't speaking. Camille's phone rang again. This time she answered. Yes? Pause. Her face shifted from anger to disbelief. What do you mean the acquisition is suspended? Across the room, one of the board members muttered, Midtown just froze. That was the cornerstone project. Without Midtown, projected revenue collapsed. Without revenue, valuations dropped. Without valuation, investor confidence fractured. Camille ended the call slowly. She looked at me, not superior, not mocking, cornered. You're ruining us, she whispered. I held her gaze. No, I said softly, you built on leverage you didn't control. Around us, guests were no longer pretending not to listen. They were recalculating alliances. And when money shifts, loyalty follows. What happened over the next 48 hours destroyed more than just a project. It destroyed their illusion of power. It didn't explode that night. It tightened. By Friday morning, Midtown's suspension became public within investor circles. Not scandalous, just paused pending compliance clarification. That phrase travels fast in finance. 2 secondary lenders issued temporary exposure reviews. One institutional partner delayed a $75 million release. The credit facility entered technical hold. Technical hold, that's the moment cash flow starts choking. Camille spent the morning on calls, her voice no longer polished, clipped, urgent. My father called me at noon. We can fix this, he said carefully, if you retract the trigger. I didn't trigger anything, the clause did. You controlled the clause. I control governance, I corrected. By afternoon, Midtown's seller pulled out of negotiations. Without Midtown, projected earnings dropped 18% overnight. 18% doesn't sound catastrophic until you're leveraged. Board members began distancing quietly. Mrs. Harrington requested independent oversight representation. That's investor language for we don't trust leadership anymore. Camille finally called me directly. What do you want? She demanded. Transparency, I said. Formal executive review and compliance restructuring. She exhaled sharply. You're killing momentum. No, I said calmly. I'm removing illusion. Silence, because she finally understood something critical. The company wasn't strong. It was extended, and extension collapses fast when confidence cracks. By Sunday, industry blogs ran subtle headlines. Wolf Development faces governance review after expansion pause. Neutral tone, devastating impact. They weren't criminals, they weren't arrested, they were worse, publicly unstable. On Monday, the board requested an emergency vote, and for the first time in her career, Camille didn't control the outcome. Monday morning felt colder than it should have. Not weather, atmosphere. The emergency board session was held over video conference. Cameras on, legal counsel present, investors dialing in. Camille sat upright, expression composed but thinner than usual. My father looked exhausted. The motion was simple. Executive leadership review and temporary authority suspension pending audit findings. In plain language, remove Camille from active control. She opened first. "This is an overreaction," she said smoothly. "We experienced a technical covenant review. That's all." I didn't interrupt. I waited for the lender's representative to speak. "The covenant was activated due to public misrepresentation of governance hierarchy," he said evenly. "Majority oversight was not acknowledged." Acknowledged. That word landed like a gavel. Board member 1 voted yes. Board member 2 hesitated, then yes. Mrs. Harrington voted yes. My father abstained. Camille looked at me through the screen. "You're doing this to win," she said quietly. I shook my head. "No," I said calmly. "I'm doing this to correct structure." The final vote passed. Temporary suspension, audit oversight initiated, discretionary authority reassigned. Not to me directly, to Governance Committee supervision, which I chaired. No shouting, no slammed doors, just formal removal. Camille muted her microphone but forgot her camera was still on. For a split second, the mask dropped. Shock. Then fear. The meeting ended. Within hours, industry blogs updated the story. Wolf Development CEO suspended amid governance restructuring. They weren't bankrupt yet, but valuations dipped, investors hesitated, and lenders tightened. Momentum reversed fully. They had built an empire on speed. I slowed it down. And when speed stops, pressure surfaces. Camille came to see me that night, without cameras, without entourage, without designer coat. Just her. For the first time in years, she looked small, not fragile, exposed. She stood across from my desk and didn't sit. "You could reverse this," she said. "I could," I agreed calmly. Silence hung between us. "You always hated that I was the face of it," she added. "No," I said evenly. "I hated that you confused visibility with control." Her jaw tightened. "The company will lose millions." "Yes." "And you're fine with that?" "I'm fine with integrity," I replied. She exhaled sharply. "What do you want?" There it was again, the question power always asks when it realizes it's cornered. "I want restructuring, reduced leverage, transparent reporting, and permanent governance acknowledgement." "And me?" "You step down from executive authority." Her face went pale. "You'd humiliate me like that?" I met her gaze. "You humiliated yourself when you built power on borrowed oversight." Silence. Longer this time. "You won't save me?" she asked quietly. "I'm saving the company." She left without another word. Within 3 weeks, 2 projects were liquidated below projection. Debt was refinanced under stricter terms. Camille formally resigned to focus on strategic advisory work. Polite language, clear demotion. The empire didn't collapse overnight. It contracted, publicly, carefully, and everyone knew why. I didn't celebrate. I didn't issue a press release. I simply ensured governance matched reality. Here's the truth they never understood. Power isn't inherited. It isn't announced at dinner. It isn't declared in a toast. It's written into structure. They thought I was quiet because I was weak. I was quiet because I was reading the clauses. If you've ever been underestimated at your own table, like this story,
Subscribe for more where strategy outplays ego. And tell me, would you have pulled the claws or stayed silent?